Everybody. Welcome to another AI Applied Consortium podcast. This is our 8th episode. Today we have Abhishek Joshi, or as I know him, AJ, who's head of consumer credit and affluent strategy at Visa. And I'm going to let AJ introduce himself here shortly. But just to level set the discussion a little bit, for those of you that have been listening to the podcast, we do like to keep things pretty laid back in terms of the discussion. We've had some really recognized names in the podcast in the last few sessions. We started with the Chancellor of Penn State as our opening podcast, went through a lot of different people in industry and academia, and we're just coming off our episode 7, which was with Dr. Satyam, who is both a trustee to the consortium and the former chief data scientist of Halliburton. So like I said, we're going to keep things kind of loose. I will ask AJ to introduce himself a little more. And we're going to talk about how AI is enabling hyper-personalization in the financial service space. And we'll talk about both the value of what it's bringing, the outcomes, how it's shifted with the advent of evolution of the technology, some of the challenges, and some of the future of this technology in the hyper-personalization area. So AJ, thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you in our upcoming symposium, which is supposed to be a lead-in into at the Visa headquarters. So we'll try to tie in a little bit of that discussion here towards the end of our session, but let's start with an introduction and maybe a level set on what hyper-personalization means to you, and then we can start from there.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. Definitely a privilege to be working with you and some of the other board members on the Applied AI Consortium. So in my current role at Visa, also in my role as an instructor at University of California, Berkeley, and then also working with you folks as a board member for Applied AI Consortium. Obviously, the advances that are happening in AI and the different applications of it are fascinating, right? But as a consumer, as in our day-to-day lives, one of the things that we are interacting the most, with all these digital players, with the apps, just in terms of even calling an Uber or a taxi, personalization is one piece which is touching everything, literally every aspect of life that we have right now as a consumer. It is touching that, right? And it's not just within the financial services industry, it is absolutely in every other industry that we work with and who are trying to serve the consumer. So and that's one area that not just at Visa, but just personally, I'm fascinated by. I almost call myself as a student of AI, and particularly thinking about personalization, because I'm really bullish in terms of where the market is headed and what can we do for consumers here, not just in the US, but broadly globally as well. And it's not just simply providing them better experiences so that they buy new things. I mean, the way I look at personalization is also very much from a well-being perspective or a utility perspective as well. I mean, there are different parts of the world where personalization is more focused on education. Personalization is more focused in terms of driving a better financial well-being for consumers, and then making sure everybody has a bright future there.
So I was, kind of, again, keeping things casual. I wanted to find interesting pivots in which we can have a discussion around this. And my first kind of intuitive pivot was your actual business title and the aspect of affluent strategy. And I'm gonna try to unpack this with an assumption that you can course correct me on. But to me, affluent customers, for example, and by no means they're the only people that you want to hyper personalize for, but to me they require a next level of service quality, right? And in that I see hyper personalization being an important piece of that, because I think you can bring a lot of unique experience, unique differentiation if you bring, let's say, custom experiences powered through artificial intelligence. And I'll hit upon a few that are maybe unrelated to what you're going to cover, but I've realized on these podcasts, AJ, that I like to talk as much as the other person. So I make these kind of in a joint bidirectional conversation. So I've seen some really cool stuff in this space on a technological level, things like using the like Microsoft Clarity, for example. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a tool that sits on your back end, and you can actually look at mouse clicks and how people interface with your websites, whether they be, desktop based websites or even like mobile applications. And you can then use a neural network to understand the behavior at that level, and then personalize interfaces that maximize the outcome, right? The outcome being, I don't know, it's a click through, it's a performance rating on the service. Like there's nuances at that level, almost subconscious nuances in the experience. And then there's the more obvious ones, like, you know, if I can gather all these signals from the customer, I can address them in a personal way. I can recommend things. So there's a spectrum of personalization from, I'll call it subconscious behaviors that are maybe grounded in interfaces to other types of signals. So again, leading into the discussion, I thought, well, what does it mean to hyper-personalize for affluent customers? And how do you take maybe some of those signals that you're getting from the customers and turn them into some relevant outcomes?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question, and particularly like if you think about the US market, right? Uh, Affluent segment, when we say affluent, like when there are multiple ways we can define affluent in terms of, let's say, net assets or household income. But generally, like when we look at affluent, I mean, these are customers who are, let's say, having a household income of more than 150,000, which again, in certain parts of the US, that doesn't matter much, but more or less as an average, like it's definitely like a good threshold for us to think about. And the reason why affluent segment is so important, especially in the US, is because the population growth in the US is actually like very, very low. In fact, like I think it's roughly around 0.5% population growth, which means the overall growth in GDP is predominantly now being driven by the growth in affluence. And so not just financial services, overall, a lot of industries are trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually get more attention, more share of wallet, being more top of mind with that affluent customer. And obviously, there's not like one size fits all or one segmentation that can define all affluent. I mean, you can put a young millennial or a fresh college graduate who can literally jump to affluent, like literally with one job offer very quickly, to folks who are like in the Gen X, or even like sometimes in the boomer segment as well. Like, and so it's basically like it's a diverse area. There are multiple sub segments within affluent that you have to serve and cater to, and that's where the notion of personalization and even hyper personalization actually comes, is because you have to understand these segments and sub segments a lot better, right? And it's no longer one affluent, it's literally probably like 10, 15 different sub segments within that, who by the way, just by nature of it, are extremely dynamic. Like one sub-segment might really move into another sub-segment once they have kids, for example, or they decide to make some asset purchases and things like that. So again, to be able to like just simply understand this segment, like just traditional analytics is not enough, right? Because it's already too late by the time you have actually analyzed this segment, like let alone create a strategy for it. You really need something as powerful as AI to be able to constantly measure and constantly identify what are the lifestyle preferences and the changing dynamics of that segment. So just to begin with, like you need AI over there to actually understand the segment. And then you take the next step in terms of thinking about, okay, now how do I personalize experiences for them? Like, how do I offer them products that have the highest chance of being adopted by these different affluent segments? And then once they're adopted, like, how do you actually like drive engagement and usage of those products? So, uh, it's personalization actually like helps with the entire gamut of things. Now, there are definitely areas such as engagement, right? Like where it's not even enough to actually think about a subsegment. Even 20, 30, 40 subsegments is not accurate enough or precise enough for us to be able to go in and and serve those segments. This is where you really truly need hyper personalization, which means it literally goes from mass to me. Literally, I am my own segment, right? And you have to literally design experiences and solutions for me as just as a segment of one.
So does that happen today? I mean, in the industry, that the hyper personalization is at an individual level where those signals that you're collecting are basically designing the experience where maybe someone else affluent that's also I don't know, I'm not going to guess your age. Let's just say you're a millennial, AJ. Uh, then the other millennial next door that is making the same salary, has similar spending habits, but maybe there's something nuanced in those signals is getting in potentially a different sort of hyper personalized value proposition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And look, I mean, the industry that has been doing this very well, and to be quite honest, they heavily rely on this in terms of monetization, are the social media companies or even digital platforms like Google, right? I mean, you almost by the nature of the business that you're running, you have to hyper personalize because that's how you keep engaged. Because like, let me think about like a platform like Instagram, right? Like the engagement there literally gets into milliseconds. Like you can literally lose somebody's interest within a second, which means like how do you keep somebody engaged and what is the right timing for you to actually drive or insert that product discovery, which again, that's their entire revenue model, right? And so industries like that where you heavily rely on literally a second or a millisecond of engagement from the consumer, you have to have hyper personalization capabilities. And again, like this is nothing revolutionary. I mean, the increase in like stock market, which is predominantly driven by AI investment right now, it's all to be able to monetize the capabilities of AI in terms of like engaging the user. So I would say in certain industries is absolutely already happening. I would almost say that they are kind of like the pioneers in terms of not thinking about a segment, but literally thinking about you as an individual. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, where it is not necessarily happening, obviously, like if you take like durable goods or physical products, like there is obviously like limitations there. Now, in terms of designing the product, like there are absolute limitations, but in terms of how you might want to talk about the product, you could absolutely use personalization. And in that case, you do still need some sort of like a sub-segmentation, which again, it can be very valuable to do that.
So
On the financial services front, sorry, go ahead.
no, go please.
Yeah. On the financial services front, I would say there is still a lot to be done in terms of going from even like just reactive analytics to truly personalize, even if it's at the segment level. Right? I think that's a journey that is happening now. I mean, it's happening quite rapidly. I would say like a lot of the financial institutions have been investing heavily in it, like where they don't have internal capabilities, they have been actually borrowing capabilities from fintech partners or some of the AI companies, or even like some of their network partners like us to kind of like accelerate their innovation there.
Right. So I want to take this two different ways that are pretty simple, but I want to share a little something first. So first, I think just to level set, what I want to hear is a little bit on your perspective on how things have advanced in the last 5 years that really make hyper personalization, let's say, take it to the next level, and how do you think things will advance, in 5 years from now? But you touched upon something, and you gave Google as an example. So we'll just stick with Google. Nothing against Google or really any IT company because I use them every day. But when I get ads on through Google Ads, or if I get something that pops up, I, believe it or not, being an AI guy, I'm kind of inversely resistant to it, regardless if it maybe hits upon a need that I have, because I feel like it was presented to me in a way that I never like explicitly said, let's say I want, I don't know, a bicycle, or I need a new, actually I got new wheels for my office chair, right? Like I'll go out of my way to get that. But I think what's unique about financial, so first of all, this is an official message to Google to stop sending me ads. But beyond that, I think with financial services, what's interesting is that there's a value to the proposition of hyper-personalization that is beyond just I want a product. It's something that can save me money. So I would say I would be more attuned to receiving hyper-personalization where a service can make me money or save me money versus buy this $100 gadget because your iPhone or whatever read an email or a text that then was consumed and used as a way to hyper personalize. So I think it's a more valuable space to present this. And I guess my long-winded way of saying, like, is there a fear, or rather a concern that hyper personalization does maybe create a counterbalance amongst people that don't want to be hyper personalized? Because I don't necessarily see one in financial services, but I intuitively have one to product placed ads. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. I think like that's where it's always a balance, right? Like in terms of are you turning customers into Conrad, like who's now actually is resisting like some of those personalized things. But I think you hit the nail on the head, especially in financial services. I mean, yes, it's about like making money or saving money, but what I would kind of articulate that as like more in terms of value. Like, can you actually like drive value for me? And in fact, in obviously in financial services, that's where you can drive direct value to the consumer, right? Like I apply for a mortgage, and because of our relationship, or because now you're actually personalizing the rate for me based on my transaction or my history with the bank, that is direct value for me. That's like you're talking about like thousands or hundreds of dollars from my monthly mortgage if you're able to shave off a few bips of my mortgage rate, right? Again, like that's where like the value in financial services to the consumer becomes extremely tangible. There are obviously more high touch value elements as well, like like in social media or online space, like the offers is a big space, especially in card payments, right? Like in card linked offers, or you getting some discount if you use a Visa card, or you buy something at a point of sale, and you instantly get some discounts there. I mean, all those are also very much in line with like personalization. And again, like you can say, well, like why don't we, if we can, why don't we give discounts and offers to every single customer? Like it doesn't work that way, right? Because from a financial institution or a merchant perspective, you only have limited dollars to play with. What you have to best determine is how do I actually deploy those to some of my best customers so that I have the best chance of actually increasing their lifetime value as well, right? And so in financial services, like I would probably say personalization isn't just like convenience or short-term gain. Like it actually like gets down to like truly long-term value, which again like translates into lifetime value for financial institutions, right? Like, and they get a couple of more years out of me as a customer. I mean, that's tremendous value for these banks. But at the end of the day, I believe it also gets down to like trust, right? Like because you're able to better serve me and able to better drive value for me, now I actually have trust in you as a financial institution. And again, like that's probably true in a lot of different industries, which again, like that trust then drives that loyalty, which drives lifetime value.
Right. Yeah. So this you kind of helped us pivot into the next discussion area, which is the change in technologies that has been able to enable different types of hyper-personalization. And I wanted to pivot to consumer credit because I felt that, I mean, maybe it has a much more holistic impact on an audience that is interested in understanding how AI might be supporting and maybe enhancing their ability to get credit, or just in general to have their credit analyzed in new lenses. And I have a background story is, I know people that come to America and they make, let's say middle to high six-figure salaries, but they start off with no credit. And, I know there's exceptions to dealing with individuals like that, for example, but I always found it kind of blind to the overall analysis of someone's credit to leave important data points more generally, regardless if it's because they, obviously are able to, have a $10,000 credit limit if they're making $500,000 a year. But more broadly, I thought, well, historically, credits, it didn't pick up all the signals that are indicative of what is the deserving amount of credit, or what is the approach that a financial service company should take with a particular individual. So maybe that's a long-winded way of saying, how has the technology allowed you to look at consumer credit differently over the years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Like particularly in the credit product, which again, I mean, if you think about like the penetration of a consumer credit card in the US, I mean, it's very high. It's like upwards of like 85% of US adults have some sort of a credit card that they use. And you're absolutely right. Like I think like especially I would probably put it like as high skilled immigrants into the country, like where you don't have a credit history, but you might have actually a pretty strong household income. Like you kind of like you can't enter the credit space just because you don't have the history. Now, in the past, the industry not necessarily like always solved for that. I mean, obviously, like there are certain things that you could do, like you can get a secure card where you're like literally putting in some funds into the bank and you're using a credit card against it, and your credit history improves because of that. But the industry didn't really solve for it a whole lot because there was still like a huge piece of the pie that they were going after, right? Like there was still like a lot of money to be made, and ability to serve the consumers like in the broader market. But over the years, as there is more realization that look, the population is not growing, like that pie is actually starting to shrink because there's not a whole lot of population out there. And then we have to turn our attention to folks who are now entering the workforce or like going to colleges, which is our Gen Z's younger generation. And then also folks who are actually coming into the country as like high skilled immigrants who have a very high chance of being affluent very quickly in the US. And so now there's definitely a need, and there's definitely a little bit more of a openness to try out different techniques or deploy AI. One of the other reasons why AI was a little bit not slow in terms of innovation, like especially in the credit risk underwriting, but it is like, I mean, if you think about credit cards, I mean, it's also governed by regulations and compliance requirement, especially around like fair lending and other requirements, which means you have to have the ability to explain the model in terms of why you're giving somebody credit or why you're approving or declining someone credit. Now, as a result of that, for the longest of time, and even today, the credit risk underwriting models, although complex, they're actually should be easy to explain. So interpretability of these models needs to be extremely high, right? And so for the longest of time, there were simple like linear regression models that were used for credit risk underwriting because easiest ones to explain to the regulators, right? Now that is changing a little bit, like that the initial resistance of using AI, or let's say even for example, like why wouldn't we use neural network for credit risk underwriting? Could you use it? Absolutely, you could use it. Could you explain why the results were coming the way they were coming? Probably not, which means that doesn't really work in the industry, right? But now, having said that, there is definitely, especially for Gen Zs, where there is not a lot of history, especially for thin files, which the term thin file is essentially thin credit history, like on your file, which again, high skilled immigrants kind of like fall into that. There are absolutely fintechs who are now doing work in terms of sourcing data that could be actually ingested into these models to be able to do better job of credit risk underwriting. But I'm also starting to see a trend where banks are now a lot more open to trying out new AI models and machine learning techniques to be able to better underwrite these folks.
So you think that's a trend that's going to continue and eventually take over the decision-making process as people become both more comfortable with the AI models doing those sort of assessments and maybe, in the form of some sort of explainability components to the models that can be built into to be able to address these, maybe, like, I'll just call them, for lack of better understanding, like audit gaps in the AI
Yes.
prediction.
Yeah. No, so look, I mean, the industry is already like headed that way. There's like tremendous amount of innovation that is already happening. Now, in terms of like driving scale, right? I mean, really every credit card issuer actually aspires to have fully automated credit approval processes, right? Like, I mean, but does it happen in reality? No, because there's always like a human in the loop that is actually making decisions on certain edge cases. Let me put it that way. Where we do see like AI is going to help a lot is sometimes even in the prioritization stage. So take something like you already have a credit card, like you've been using the credit card for a while, your affluence level actually grows and your need to have a higher credit line actually increases. Now, where 15,000 used to be okay for you, 15,000 in credit line, now you actually need to have like 25,000 because your needs have changed. So credit card issuers run this program called credit line increase programs, which means you look at your transaction data, you look at the consumer behavior, payment history and everything, and you raise their credit line. So it's a very simple process. A lot of it is also very automated, but sometimes it's still the challenge is actually prioritization. Like, who do I actually identify? Who is going to be ready for a credit line increase program? And this is where like we are starting to deploy AI quite a bit as well, where they can mine the data. And in fact, now it's getting more in terms of not just that Conrad is ready for a higher credit line now, it is getting more into prediction, where it is like Conrad actually is on track to be ready for a higher credit line in the next 6 to 7 months, which is incredibly powerful because this is when you can actually get into the cycle a lot early and proactively offer you a credit line increase so that you stay more engaged.
Can I apply for a credit line right now, AJ, on the phone with you, or that's not
You have to work with some of the banks that we work with, because from our side, like we just provide the technology for card.
Okay.
It's obviously like the banks are making the credit rates.
That was
underwriting
yeah.
decisions.
You can also maybe reset some of my credit limits if you like there with a couple of button clicks, no problem.
Yeah.
So hey, this is kind of the part where I wanted to lead into a more softer discussion. First, by talking a little bit about our upcoming symposium, which we're calling Signals to Outcomes at AI Mission Rock. Maybe you can take me a little bit through, last year, what you recall from last year, because this is the second annual one, and now we're having it at Mission Rock. I think last year we had it at a parallel location, and take me through like what you're looking forward to there in terms of the discussion, because we have a lot of cross-industry folks that are going to be attending and sharing. So I just wanted to get your perspective a little bit about this session and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so look, I mean, super excited to host the other board members and advisors and yourself as well. Look, I mean, this is we don't get these opportunities a whole lot where we are able to like step back from our day-to-day roles and truly understand like where the industry is headed, and especially in a space like AI, which is moving so rapidly. Like, I have to be honest, I just can't keep up with the amount of innovation that is happening in this space. And I try to stay updated as much as I can. And it's still like far behind. And so like you have to take opportunities like this where you're meeting with some of the industry leaders and truly digesting like what's happening and then reflecting in terms of like where we want to invest in the future, right? So super excited about that. I think for the session that is coming up in Mission Rock, which is our market support center for Visa, we actually moved there last year. Fantastic location. I think everybody will enjoy it. Um, like there are two things I would like to focus on. Like one is share with the group like some of the innovation that Visa is doing in this space. Now, obviously, like it's going to be like a closed roundtable invite only, so not a public event, but obviously like like we've really selected the folks who will be in the session. But some of our top data science leaders at Visa will be sharing some of the innovation and investments that they are doing and how we are supporting our clients, but then most importantly, how we are also reinventing how we do things at Visa with AI now. So I think like that will be like very fruitful conversation. So my intention is like to almost like keep that as maybe like half of the day where we are kind of like diving deep into it, and it will be very beneficial for the board members and advisors to kind of like hear about this. But then I think like we will truly get ton of value like if we also hear like more cross industry perspective. Like for example, I mean I was born and brought up in the manufacturing space, and I still to date believe that like some of the best innovation in digital, in terms of IoT, in terms of AI is actually happening in manufacturing, right? And I know we have several manufacturing experts in our board of members and advisors. And so I would love for my team at Visa, myself, and others to actually also hear about that. Because again, that's not only just inspiration for us in terms of how should we think about applications of AI, but there are a ton of things that we can probably like just learn and potentially like just turn around and deploy at Visa or for some of our institutions. And then especially a space like AI, where I believe we will make a lot of progress through cross-industry collaboration. One of the other things I really love about this group is that you just don't have like industry folks, you also have really accomplished folks from academia as well, which again, like that's another area of innovation where, I mean, there are a ton of like, even in our board of directors, like we have several PhD folks who have done like done some marvelous work around cybersecurity and other areas, which I think like is huge areas of innovation in AI.
Right, yeah. And I look forward to seeing you. You know, it's been like almost, I think, a year since we last saw each other, so it'll be fun. Um, I don't know if you've, AJ, if you've seen the other podcasts, but you're not going to be spared from the end of the podcast because no one else was. So I always like to ask one left field question that is
Yeah.
unrelated, unaffiliated to Visa. This is a personal opinion question. And I started off, I think, right with episode one with the Chancellor of Penn State asking him about AI and if he believes it will become sentient and what his plans are if it does. And I've asked a few other ones, but I'm going to give you that one to digest in 30 seconds for us. Do you think AI will ever become sentient? And do you think it will become sentient in a way that's dangerous to society? Or do you think that we'll find a way to manage that and kind of leverage it to, reinvent society?
Yeah,
Philosophical
yeah.
question. You can answer by saying no or yes, or you can elaborate, depending on how much trouble you want to get into.
No, so I mean, it's absolutely like it's a tough question. Obviously, I don't have the answer. I do have a point of view, which is mainly based on probably like some fears that I have, but then also like some excitement in terms of like what it will do. So, look, I mean, it's going to be a balance, but at a high level, my fear is that policy is not keeping pace with technology. And like technology is like far ahead, and policy is like just now like starting to like pay attention. And like some of the work that we had done where we had submitted a white paper to the government on like our policy posture on AI regulations across different industries. I mean, like that kind of like starts the conversation. But just think about it. Even since we had done that, how much innovation has occurred? And how many times have we actually gone back to the paper and like really reflected in terms of how that needs to be changed, right? And so again, like that's like one of my biggest fear is that like policy is not there yet, which will put some guardrails to usage of AI and like misuse of AI. That's kind of like my biggest fear. But then in terms of like if I put my, let's say, engineering or math hat on and like think about economic prosperity and think about most importantly productivity, like you almost have to like AI take its course as fast as possible so that we start seeing some of these productivity gains so that we can actually justify all the investment that is happening in this space. But like look, I mean, just from a philosophical perspective, and just maybe more of a fun thing for me to do. Now I'm actually like really very cognizant and aware of where I'm using devices, where I am using like obviously like these digital experiences that are run by AI. And I'm actually very aware now, getting more aware of how it is influencing me as a consumer, as a person, including how I think about things and how the opinions that I'm forming. And so I think like it's very important to kind of like think about it this way, because I think the biggest change or the biggest way AI could hurt us is truly change how we think and the opinions that we form of things. And then obviously, like, with AI, like you can create deep fakes, you can create like, voice fakes and stuff like that. And then, like you can truly start impacting like how the population thinks about some critical issues. And what you don't want is them thinking about it the wrong way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that your perspective is the right one, and I think it's good to kind of ground the problem in the low-hanging aspects of AI, right? Like an AI that becomes sentient and Terminator 2's us is something that is, I don't, hopefully never going to happen, but if it does, it's not in the imminent kind of future. The bigger problems are things like you mentioned, right? So like the AI having the ability to be the channel of knowledge can become biased, can remove some of the creativity of societal aspects of individuals. So all those things are relevant. I think so. One other thing that is also very relevant in the short term is that automation line. How much
Yeah.
how much automation gets in the hands of artificial intelligence, and what does that do to the workforce? And like to your point, policy. Like at some point, if we live in a belief system where AI can achieve all those things, then we have to build in policy to allow for humanity still to flourish and not to be overridden, right? However way that looks, whether that's
Yeah.
uh, you know throttling some aspects, whether it's uh, promoting others to assure that what we're building is broadly going to support individuals to maybe build more creatively faster, right? And allowing that sort of thing not to allowing capitalistic drivers, which are important because money drives society, to not completely overrun uh, the human workforce. Right? Those are I think the lower hanging, incrementally challenging. First with bias and like removing some of the thought processes to full automation, and then the sentient piece. We'll worry about it. I think we should all worry about it to some level, but it's not
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that is maybe impactful in the imminent future. So,
No,
um,
absolutely.
yeah,
No, and look, uh, and you know this about me, like I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well, and I always like to like draw parallels between like what is happening in obviously like in our lives today, especially like with AI, and like was like it's a fiction in Star Wars, obviously. But like the way I would like to call it is like the objective function on AI is so important. So like, obviously like, there is like you think about R2D2 or C3PO in Star Wars. Like, can you ever imagine them harming the the humans or the aliens that they are supporting, right?
Yeah.
It's basically like it's programmed that you're there to help the human, right? And in that case, like you can almost imagine like things will not go wrong. In fact, like their objective function is to help them. But now if you change that objective function and you say, I'm just making it up, but you say something like, no, like the objective function is for you as an AI to maximize productivity, period. Right? Then you can start actually thinking about like some really adverse actions that can be taken for less productive things where humans could actually fit. Right. And so again, like that's kind of like how I always like to think about it is like if the galaxy far, far away could make it work, like I feel like we can make it work as well.
But they did have battle droids. So just there was
Yeah.
someone else making those battle robots. I mean, the underlining
Yeah.
moral of the story is, I guess, like it's in the power of the beholder, right? And that means that people can, for their own selfish needs,
Totally. Yeah.
hijack this
Mm.
technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll end this on a Star Wars analogy. AJ, thank you again for taking the time today to sit with me and to speak. I look forward to seeing you at Mission Rock on October 30th. And I think hopefully we touched upon some topics that connected with our audience, and we look forward to having our audience also, connect with us through the consortium. Like you said, we're doing a lot of very interesting things across all our advisory groups, across different industries. We recently had a really rich participation and connection to the American AI policy that was released. So I encourage everyone to look into that in our socials and in our former podcasts where we discussed them. So thank you again, AJ, for your time, and look forward again to our upcoming symposium.
Yep. Same here, Conrad. See you in 2 weeks.